Days Festival. Our festival represents the 4 townships of Silver, Split Rock, Altumba, Calabala, and the city of Kettle. This year's Time to Remember program commemorates the 100th anniversary of the 1918 fires. The program is a character reenactment from each of the townships and the city of Kettle. The music reflects the cultural heritage and the powerful emotions of the fires and the hope and the encouragement in the rebuilding. A grateful thank you to the volunteers that assembled the wonderful history displays that you see around the room. The display is in the back of the room, gives recognition to the United States World War I involvement, pays tribute to the 100th anniversary of the American Legion, and shares the never-ending commitment of the American Red Cross during the flu epidemic after the fire. There are displays sharing the past Ma and Pa Kettle days, past and present area churches, history of the townships, displays commemorating the 1918 fires and remembering lives lost. There are 2 local living survivors, Eiley Salantha Chernick Costello. She's 103 years old, living at Villa Vista in Prom. She can still recall events from the fire. Also, Lucy Cheslock Philipiak Baybeck is now 101 years old and lives in Grand Rapids. If you have family stories to tell, we have areas near the displays to share and record those. As we look forward to future remembering events, we need your input. We have a display asking for information about how Kettle River and the business is rebuilt. Remembering and recording history is an ongoing effort. So it's a very nice, great program, so please enjoy. Thank you.
Finlandia. Oi swabi katso sinun päiväs koittaa. Renukkakaan koitettu on jo pois. Ja aamun kilru kirkaudessa soittaa. Kuin itse taivaan kansi sois. Pyhän valaton mun valkeus jo hoitaa. Sun päiväs koittaa, toisen maa. Oi nouse Suomi, nosta korkealle. Pääse päälöimä suurten muistojen. Oi nouse Suomi, näytin maa ilmalle. Sä ettekaan ja ette taipunut sä solon alle, on ammus alkanut syntymään. The next song is Rhonda Mercury, Cabin on the Shore. Silrantamökissä istuihän, tuo vanhus armaaja pää. Hän katsoo liekien leikeihin ja vad lapset maailman häpelähteneet. Elon iltaan yksin on hänet jättäneet. Yhä vietät iltansa hän ajattelee. Kerralla muistojen. Vaan ainoa ystävä teetänetön on kukka artunantaan. Siit hoiva helien yövellen ja suojelle myrskyiltä maan. Tuopi hälle loptua ajan mielen saa, joka häipyi vuosien mainen keitten taa. Kunnes kädet taivaalta pois katoaa, aamuun uinattaa. The next song is kind of a special song here, especially to the Reed family. I think Tuala Mangotani is a love song, but in the hymnals it was lost in the night, and it was a beautiful hymn. This is in Finnish. In Finland it was a love story. There is my sweetheart. Tuo on mun kultani aina tuolla, kuningas kultaisen kartanon tuolla. Voi minun lintuni, voi minun kultani, kun et tule joo, kun et tule joo. On siellä tyttöjä, on komioita, kultani silmäti katsellen noita. Voi minun lintuni, voi minun kultani, kun et tule joo, kun et tule joo. Linnut ne laulavat sorjalla suulla, sorjampi kultani ääni on kuulla. Voi minun lintuni, voi minun kultani, kun et tule joo, kun et tule joo. Oi, koska näen minä sen ilopäivän, kultani, se kultani astuvan ja käyvän. Voi minun lintuni, voi minun kultani, kun et tule joo, kun et tule joo. Tule, tule, kultani, tule kotipuolen, taikka jos mene hinkin ikävän ja huolen. Voi minun lintuni, voi minun kultani, kun et tule joo, kun et tule joo.
Yes. The world of 1918 in Minnesota and our area was impacted by three major events: the fires of 1918, the flu epidemic, and the First World War. An event in a native prediction coincidentally came within days of the October 12 fires that leveled our area. On this 100th anniversary of those fires, we should mark the Native American view of all this tragedy. To open settlement of our area, a treaty was negotiated and signed between the Chippewa peoples of this area and the federal government. Chief Joseph Osagie of the Chippewa Nation was recognized by then President Franklin Pierce, and as headman of the Fond du Lac, was asked to sign the Treaty of 1854. Chief Osagie was living on Wisconsin Point, which is across the bay from Duluth Park Point, also known as Minnesota Point. In that treaty, the land of Wisconsin Point was conveyed to the government. Years go by, and the Chippewa continued to use Wisconsin Point as a burial ground site, and Chief Osagie was buried there in the 1870s. Along comes World War I, and the U.S. Steel Corporation wishes to build loading docks on Wisconsin Point for their steel products. The Chippewa refused to give them permission to relocate the native cemetery there. A great-grandson of Chief Osagie goes to the law offices of Attorney John Cadigan and asks for help. He tells the attorney, "My father, grandfather, and great-grandfather, Chief Joseph Osagie, and many others lie buried on Wisconsin Point. Their bones must not be disturbed. I tell you that the day the white man enters the point to dig up the remains of our ancestors will see this nation visit the most terrible fire in history, swept by the most devastating plague, and plunged into the bloodiest war the world has ever known." On October 8, 1918, U.S. Steel started to move remains from the point. The attorney for the native descendants wrote, "An undertaker was given $2,500 as an advance payment under a contract and took a crew to the point and started to move the graveyard. 200 remains were dug up, put on a garbage scow, and relocated to St. Francis Cemetery, and then reburied on the edge of a hill overlooking the Nemadji River." Attorney Cadigan continued, "That day, about noon, the heavens became black for a time with a peculiar cloud. By evening, the newspapers were filled with headlines of the Cloquet Moose Lake area fires, the largest natural disaster in Minnesota. The same paper conveyed news of the sweeping wave of influenza throughout the world and the bloody Musagone campaign leading up to the end of World War I with heavy American casualties. The desecration of the Wisconsin Point burial grounds was a futile move. U.S. Steel found the waterfront area too sandy for loading dock construction and built them in another area of the lakeshore. Over the years, the native burial ground in the St. Francis Cemetery was a victim of erosion to the Nemadji River waters, and in many of the native graves were washed away. The natives say their ancestors were returning to Wisconsin Point."
The beginning of Kettle River and the 4 townships. Many of the first settlers who came to settle in the 1880s found work in the log drives in the Kettle River watershed. Some came specifically to work in the harvesting of virgin timber, and they fell in love with the area. Many of the Scandinavians said it reminded them of their homeland. By the time of the log drives, most of the native population had been forced out, some relocated. The Chippewa, who called themselves Anishinaabe, had large groups of people living in the present Fond du Lac area west of Cloquet, and in the East Lake area south of McGregor around Rice Lake. At this time, natives traveled through this area going to spring and fall celebrations, berry picking, maple tree tapping, and hunting. In the early days of Moose Lake and Barnum, native tents and dwellings made from birch bark were still used for housing. About the time of the start of the Civil War, when the military road was being constructed from Twin Cities to Superior, the survey crew had come upon the Chippewa natives along the route and asked them what the river in this area was called. The natives replied, Akikozibi, which translates as Kettle River. The bedrock along the river, after its exposure to the elements of freezing and running water, formed round pots into the stone, and to the natives, they looked like kettles. As the old St. Paul Duluth Railroad was being laid out in 1869-1870, a crossing of the waters of the Kettle River south of here was called Kettle River and remained as such until the Rutledge Lumber Company was established there in 1891. And then that site became known as Rutledge. This site actually became very important in later years for catching the log drive timber, where it was loaded onto railroad cars for shipment. The building of the Sioux Line Railroad opened up heavy logging and settlements to what would soon be called Kettle River, Atumba, and Lawler. Work started in 1909 and finished in 1910, hooking Moose Lake to the Crosby area iron ore mines and rail service to Thief River Falls. The bid to build the rail grade, which was 6.5 miles from Moose Lake to Kettle River, the Kettle River trestle crossing, with little change in the elevation between the 2 points, was given to a man by the name of McGrath, who was low bidder. He determined that he would use 600 men with shovels to build the grade, and he did in a little over 2 months. In 1909, the Sioux Line decided that the name Finland would be given to the spur siding just before the Kettle River trestle. So the north side of the rail line was platted as Finland. Early legal paperwork refers to that side as Suomi, which is the Finnish name for the country of Finland. The spur remained that name until around 1912, when a businessman, Alvin Odberg, had the south side of the tracks platted, and he called that subdivision Kettle River. Several people have said they were consulted when the name Kettle River was chosen. County Commissioner John Manning, Joe and Otto Winquist, Wilson and Martilla, among others, realized that the name Finland, which had also been given to a town in northern St. Louis County, caused freight and mail to be shipped to the wrong location, and it needed to be changed. No other Minnesota town had the name Kettle River, and so the spur, and then the post office, which had been moved from the Herman Lampell farm, would be known as Kettle River. The Finns of the area called it by its Finnish name, Kattilajoki. Many dates have been noted as to when the town site of Finland became known as Kettle River. The very first time it occurs in print officially was an entry in the February 1911 edition of the Moose Lake Star-Gazette. Quote, Otto Winquist traveled to Moose Lake on business from Kettle River, unquote. In the early pioneer period of the 1880s and into the 1890s, there were no townships called Silver, Split Rock, Kalevala, or Atumba. Township government for the whole area was done under the Moose Lake Township. The original settlers called it Moose Lake Country. Split Rock Township was the first to be established in the 1890s and bordered Pine County to the south, Aiken County to the west, and was 6 miles wide to the north, and bordered by the waters of the Kettle River in the east. It covered an acreage of about 1.5 federal-sized townships. Kalevala Township was established in 1897, which included both the present Kalevala Township and the present Ottumba Township. During the first years of Kalevala Township, the local settlers spoke of them as East and West Kalevala. As the town site of Ottumba boomed, Ottumba Township was formed in 1914 from the west half of Kalevala Township. Then the defining line of East and West Kalevala became the waters of the Kettle River as it made its way from Kettle Lake source to the north. In 1915, a number of Kettle River area activists petitioned the Carleton County Board of Commissioners, and a new township was established, carved out partly from Split Rock Township and partly from Moose Lake Township. It was first known as Kettle River Township, but soon acquired the name of Silver Township. Frank Ronkanen, Alvin Poppanen, and Arthur Force were elected supervisors, with Fred Anderson as clerk, Paul Ryan and Fred Anderson as justices of the peace, Frank Wilson as treasurer, Ed Odberg as treasurer, and Zachary Martilla as constable. And this defines the beginning of the fourth township of Split Rock, Kalevala, Ottumba, and Silver, and the village of Kettle River.
I am William Max. I had a partnership with my brother-in-law, Charles Yokimeki. I had married Olga Yokimeki about 1910 and lived up in the Yokimeki country of Ottumba, Ontario. Next to farms owned by Yokimeki brothers, William, Arthur, and Charles. Charles and I worked hard and had 3 sawmills by the time of the 1918 fire. One mill was in the Ottumba rail yard directly south of the main street with 500,000 board feet of lumber drying in piles. Another was in the northwest corner of Section 20, along the Dead Moose River, surrounded by log piles and piled lumber. The third was on the north end of Section 21, also just north of the same river. Our business interest was known as Yokimeki and Mackie. Matt Reed, who was married to our niece Edna, had built a hotel in Ottumba between the Ringo Brothers store and the depot. We bought this building and started a store and used it as a base of operations for ourselves. Weeks before October 12th, Charlie and I and the men working for us fought the fires to the west of Ottumba to keep the blaze out of the rail yard. Most of the Sioux Line track corridor from Kettle River through Ottumba and up to Lawler was burning. The very topsoil was burning. Scores of men were fighting fire that Saturday before heavy winds came up. I believe small fires all the way to Tamarack rolled together in a wall of flame and swept into town. Within minutes, the rail yard and all the businesses were involved. My wife Olga, Charlie, and I drove Charlie's Ford car, headed out of town. The road was on the north side of the rail tracks, and then went south to the Polish settlement. The road towards Kalevala had already been blocked by smoke, fire, flames. As we left Main Street, the last thing I saw were burning curtains waving goodbye to us from the burning businesses and houses. The Whiting family was behind us, with their family loaded on a wagon, pulled by horses. I knew they would never make it. They were found burned along the road to the Polish settlement. Charlie drove his car as fast as he could to the south. The wind and flames were like a tornado fire, blowing burned trees over the road. We could drive no farther and ran for our lives. We could have died in the smoke and fire, but somehow we didn't. I could not help but think of the inferno in the timber rail yard and how those flames and heat were following us, trying to catch us. Our little group managed somehow to make our way to Field, where many refugees from the Polish settlement and from Alpunda had gathered. As I remember, it was a large crowd. The flames spared us there. Two of the neighborhood boys decided to hide in the Jurek root cellar, not too far from us, and they died there. We went to Alpunda the next day. Mrs. Whiting was burned severely and was crying for her family. Area men had brought her to Mahowski's farm, and she died there later. We found her family and other Alpunda people dead along the road. Alpunda was level. The highest thing left standing in town was arguably a East Thomas Street. The rail yard was still in flames, and twisted rail cars and remnants of those three large sawmills scattered throughout the area. Reports told of bodies, human and wild animals, floating in the mill ponds. 23 people burned right in town or trying to get away. Within a couple of days, they were lined up in a row at this rail siding, waiting for coffins and transport. Charlie and I lost everything, and it broke us. But the whole time I was lucky. We had our lives and our children. Charlie lost a son. Art lost a son. William lost his wife and 6 children. Old guy and I and brother-in-law Charlie were the last ones to get out of Alpunda alive. There was no time for too much sorrow. Winter was coming. Charlie headed the Red Cross relief work in Alpunda, distributing food and buildings and materials for Red Cross staff. My wife Olga was temporary postmaster of Alpunda because of the current postmaster, Rory, had had a nervous breakdown after his elderly parents burned to death in the fire. I found work building houses to get through the first winter. We rebuilt, and we started over.
I am Chalmer Yangala, also known by the name of Jacob. I preferred to be called Yangala because I reflected the Finnish nationalism that rose during the time of the First World War, and we should use a Finnish name. I and my brother William were well-known farmers and sawmill operators in the area at the time of the fire. My father was Matt Yangala, born in Tornio, Finnish Sweden, and was in West Duluth in about 1890 to marry my mother, Hilda Leon, Kettle River. They had a farm in what was then in Split Rock Township by what now can be described as right to the west of Lloyd Leon's place. 4 children were born there. Me, William, Alma, and Hilda. Times were difficult for my parents. I and my siblings were boarded out to local families. And some of us went to a family in Midway Township area of Duluth. My mother finally went to Fergus Falls State Hospital and died there in 1900 of tuberculosis. My father remarried in 1903 to Greta Anna Lettoma, and William and I worked on his farm. The sewer line came through our Split Rock property in 1909, and my father, he saw opportunity to work for railroads and their construction contractors. There was an auction sale on September 3rd, 1909. Yes, here's the handbill. It was in the Moose Lake Star-Gazette. Anyway, it says that we sold 12 milk cows. Some will fresh this fall. 7 head of young stock, 1 span of bay mares, 1 spring colt, 50 tons of hay, 1 bull, 50 chickens, farm machinery, and a household goods. The editor of the Star-Gazette, C.F. Mankey, was the auctioneer, and by 1910, my father, William, and I were section hands for a railroad living in Midway Township. By 1915, William and I had bought a steam tractor and a sawmill and a threshing machine. And we threshed grain for farmers in the area in the fall and ran a sawmill in this area the rest of the year. We had small logging jobbers that supplied saw timber for us. We did do some custom saw work. At times we ran our own logging camps to supply saw bolts and market wood. We had a mill site in the southwest corner of Kettle River Town site for some time, but finally ended up sawing cans, lath, and box bolts in the Atumba area. The sawmill workers included in that neighborhood our old neighborhood friend Lugo Lufo, Emo Corpsey, Richard Mackey, Atumba's John and Will Hoyoki Mackey, Nestor Peters, Walter Peters ran the sawmill for us. He was a sawyer. We trained him. Nicky Coivisto, and then Aina Rayala was the cook. William and I had a sawmill located just west of William Yokimaki's farm, who also had a sawmill. And now it's the Ray Johnson's farm, and had 1 million board feet of lumber piled on both sides of the road at the time of the fire. The sawmill was located on the south side of the road. We thought we could save our sawmill and lumber piles. but a wall of flames came from the northwest. Ooh. As we fled the sawmill area to the northeast, flaming boards were flying through the air from our burning lumber piles. Sometimes half a mile they blew. We made it as far as Bill Mackey's farm, located a quarter mile northeast of our mill. We could go no farther. The crew of 5, Luso, Horsby, Rayala, and William and I, climbed in the well, hanging on a well rope. The rope burned, and we died. For 2 days, the search parties looked for us. They looked in all the area wells, but could see nothing. They looked in the woods, scoured every stump, and could find nothing. They knew, though, we weren't too far. Finally, Nick Butkiewicz, who had been working for us at that time, searched with Nestor Peters, and they decided to tie 2 half-burnt boards together with some burned fence wire, and they stirred Bill Mackey's well. A head and an arm bobbed up. They found us. A group of men gathered. People argued who to send down in that well to attach a rope to pull us out. In the meantime, our white horse walked up to the edge of the well and just stood there at attention and did not move. Finally, Matt Reed came from our Butkiewicz home from the south and asked if he could help. The group told them of their dilemma. Matt said he would climb down and secure our bodies with a rope. He had not been afraid of us when we were alive. Why be afraid now? The group pulled our bodies out and loaded them on a wagon for transport to Moose Lake. We were interred with 200 others, and we're there now. During all this activity, our horse stood by the ramp. Once our bodies were hauled away, the horse, he turned around and he wandered off. Meanwhile, our folks, Matt, stepmother Greta Ann, and Uncle Tom, lost their lives in the burning inferno of Kettle River. Our stepmother was found clutching her spinning wheel on the school point. Our father was found east in Oddbird's field. Their house is where Mark and Barb Lund lives now. The folks and my uncle joined us in a mass grave in Louisville. After the fire, Matt Wilson, a 12-year-old boy, found a coffee can full of bonds, money, and legal papers, and returned it to what was left of our family. The can, which had contents valuing $2,000, was found lying on Oddbird's field. He was rewarded for his honesty.
Spokane, Minnesota, 1918. It was the most dramatic sunset that I have ever seen. Located Minnesota, 1918. Watched it from the porch, never thought about the war. But that night we were awakened by a pounding at the door. Get out of your house, there's a fire bearing down. By tomorrow there'll be nothing but ashes in this town. The sky was dark with smoke, blowing embers on the wind. And I never saw my childhood home again. People pushed in all directions, not knowing where to go. Then they ran to the train station when I heard the whistle blow. Train was a symbol with every kind of car. It wasn't very comfortable, but the trip was not that far. And some people hid in root cellars and died a long slow death. Some jumped into their wells where they could not catch a breath. Some survived in rivers in the water to their ears, with their heads under wet blankets, all alone there with their fears. Get out of your house, there's a fire bearing down. By tomorrow there'll be nothing but ashes in this town. The sky was dark with smoke, blowing embers on the wind. And I never saw my childhood home again. My cousin lived in Kettle River, where so many died that day. They loaded every car in town and they tried to drive away. There's a sharp turn down the road where the Kettle River bends. In their panic they all drove too fast to where their story ends. And the windows cracked and shattered as the train burst through the flames. We sheltered children with our bodies and distracted them with games. When we rolled into Duluth, all the people took us in. We thank God the town was spared by a chilling onshore wind. Get out of your house, there's a fire bearing down. By tomorrow there'll be nothing but ashes in this town. The sky was dark with smoke, blowing embers on the wind. And I never saw my childhood home again. Our troubles still weren't over, 'cause next came the Spanish flu. Well, you can run away from fire, but from that what could we do? I'm still awake from nightmares when I think about that day. I still can hear the knocking, still can hear them say, get out of your house, there's a fire bearing down. By tomorrow there'll be nothing but ashes in this town. The sky was dark with smoke, blowing embers on the wind. And I never saw my childhood home again. So get out of your house, there's a fire bearing down. By tomorrow there'll be nothing but ashes in this town. The sky was dark with smoke, blowing embers on the wind. And I never saw my childhood home again.
I am Frank Williams, a farmer, a local leader in Kettle Township. I was not one of the earliest settlers in the area, but I bought 40 acres, described as the southwest quarter of the northwest quarter of Section 28, Kettle Township, and built a homestead. My wife, Saima, and I had 3 children who attended the Mansica School. We went often to social gatherings, like dances at the Workers' Hall, also known as the Black Hall, which was nicknamed that way because black tarred rolled roofing covered the outside of the hall's walls. Midsummer and New Year's Eve dances were popular local events there. Hot lead was poured into a pan of water, and fortunes were interpreted on New Year's Eve. Finn was spoken in business and day-to-day activities. Township records were written in Finn. Other nationalities in the area thought that Finns kept to themselves and were clannish. Using Finn felt comfortable to us, with almost everyone a Finnish immigrant. We used broken English when we had to. The children grew comfortable with the English language and still had an accent when they talked. When America entered World War I in 1917, many local boys were drafted. Fundraisers for the Red Cross and a push for war bonds were supported eagerly by the neighborhood. My family attended one Red Cross fundraiser in Kettle River at the Peter Corhanen home. Over $100 was raised for the cause. The best part of the event was when a black hen donated by Mrs. Jacob Manny netted $48.50. That little chicken was sold over and over again and showed the patriotism of the 200 plus attendees. The late summer and fall have been hot with no rain. The steam locomotives of the railroads have formed ribbons of fire all along the rail corridors. We have asked for government troops, but the answer is no. Home Guard groups formed as patriotic men, training themselves into local militia units, have been called out to fight fires throughout the region. Word has come that over 1,000 acres of hay had burned in the McGregor Grayling area, with homes destroyed in Grayling a week ago. Frank Ronkanen, a supervisor for Silver Township, is in charge of a fire line along the flowage of the Kettle River, south of the town of Kettle River. I am in charge with Charlie Silverberg of firefighters from Kettle River, north up through Calavella. We have been trying to put out numerous fires for the last month, and winds each day fan up the flames. Every able-bodied man in the area, some coming from Moose Lake and Marlin and farther, works the fire line. October 12th came, and we organized the fire line again. My men seemed to sense how serious it was, the fight between life or death. We had made progress stopping some of the small fires that remained from the night, but strong winds picked up. The sky grew smoky and black. Roaring, exploding sounds started to ripple towards us from the northwest, and the air grew warmer, filled with sparks and soot. By late afternoon, I knew the battle was lost. I told the boys to head for their homes and save their families. Men of the fire crew took off, many of them running. I hurried home and got there just as a wall of fire rushed into a heavy stand of evergreen and pine north and west of the house. In an instant, the whole neighborhood seemed on fire. Before I got home, my wife and 3 children, along with the neighbor, Ivor Yellowden, and his wife and child, had gone into the root cellar next to the house. They are going to die. I fought off the flames to protect them until it was no use. My clothes started on fire, and I ran to the nearby Township road looking for safety. The thick evergreen woods on either side of the road made escape impossible. I crawled on the hard-packed, dry road, pulling with my arms and hands. I clawed at the roadbed, making grooves with my fingers as I burned to death. The National Guard came the next morning and transported both the families to the mass grave in Moose Lake. We left no local relatives to mourn us. State Area Forester P.W. Swedberg has written in his summation of fire losses, timber damage, and overall cost of the big fire that 15 to 20 of the men helping us in the fire lines became trapped and burned on that awful day.
I am Steve Township. When I came to the Split Rock homestead in 1896, at 2 years old, after my brother Martin and my parents, Mike and Delvina Township. There were no real roads, and most of the travel was along trails, usually made by loggers and traders. At an early age, my job was to walk to Moose Lake each fall and roll a barrel of flour back to the family farm. I had to stay one night along the trail, and it took me long into the next day when I got home. One winter, a can of kerosene leaked in the storage room, with the flour barrel directly under it. The flour could not be replaced easily. I remember eating kerosene-flavored homemade bread all that winter. In the years around 1916 to 1917, I worked for Fred Day at his logging and sawmill operations at the end of the Brown Road on the Aiken County line. I got married during that time and had to get a $20 advance for the wedding and the honeymoon. I started working on log drives during these years and worked further north after the fire into the 1920s. I was a small man, quick on my feet, and drove the logs in that process. All of the able-bodied men in that area helped fight fire the month before October 12. Autumnal was our livelihood, and the north half of Split Rock Township brought supplies, hauled logs, and worked in the rail yard. John Young, a prospector from Crosby, was a partner in the Autumnal Mining and Development Company. He was convinced there was major iron ore and other precious metals in the area. He had an exploration pit in the southwest one quarter of the southeast one quarter of section 33 of Temple Township. The exploration was funded by 2 logging camps in that area. The morning of October 12, I had been asked to load a rail car with timber and drove my team and wagon to Autumnal. That afternoon, fire threatened the rail yard, and I decided to leave. I begged Mr. Young to come with me. He refused. The last time I saw him alive, he was standing on the depot platform with his bicycle on his side. We found him after the fire at the bottom of the test pit hole, standing, leaning against the dirt, with his hat still on his head, shielding his eyes. After I got home, I went with a group of men to save the buildings on the Philippiac place. The barn started to burn. I went up on the ladder trying to put out the flames. When the house started to burn, Tony Philippiac took the ladder unwillingly to try to save the house. With the barn roof burning fiercely, I had to jump to the ground and save myself. The group went down to Piesky's to try to stop the flames. It was hopeless. It got so hot that we had to jump into a pond close by the driveway. After the largest wall of fire passed, we headed north, towards home. The Hattenberger buildings were burning, and we walked on. In the smoke, we did not see Mrs. Hattenberger and the child safe in a plowed field, or Gregory Hattenberger in the road ditch. Afterwards, Gregory said he tried to call out, but he could neither speak or move. Place after place was burned as we kept walking north. Two places, Butkiewicz and Cycler Road, had exploded in flames during the passing of the wall of fire. The child, Mary Chanel, had been burned to death in such an explosion and found in the ashes of the home site the next day. Old man George Cycler rushed into his house to retrieve cash he got for selling a bowl just that day. The house exploded and he was gone. We finally ended up spending the night with a large group of refugees on the rear at the field. On Sunday morning, I walked to a tunnel and found the dead in grotesque, twisted, and charred positions. How can you really use words to describe such a thing? We're lucky, lost everything, but none of my family died. The official fire death list of 453 people throughout northeast Minnesota is low. Countless numbers died from smoke, flu, and numerous health problems within a few months of the disaster. Itinerant workers from many parts of the country died without anyone accounting for their deaths. We rebuilt and expanded the farm. I was active in getting phone service into our neighborhood and helped start StartNet. The neighborhood worked hard to make the creamery a success in Kettle River. It has been a good life.
I am John H. Matson. I was born in Calumet, Michigan in 1882. My father, Charles Matson, who homesteaded a place described as southwest quarter of the southeast quarter, section 32, Ottumwa Township, in 1890. But as a child, I did not start living there until 1894. There were no roads. Only a trail existed at the time getting supplies from Moose Lake. My father got a job with the log drive company during this period. My mother's health started to fail, and my father moved most of the family to New York Mills in 1904 to be near relatives. I stayed in the area and became a clerk for Swanson Brothers of Moose Lake in 1898. By 1900, a new firm was organized as Jacobson and Gay. I owned some shares in the business and was vice president. The firm had a store in Moose Lake that handled general merchandise, farm, dairy, hay, and timber products. Log drives to transport spruce pulpwood and railroad ties were conducted by the firms on the tributaries of the Kettle River and floated to the log boom in Rutledge. Rail cars were loaded there until 1908. The Sioux Line rail lines were soon going through the area from 1908 to 1910 and put an end to log drives. In 1908, S.A. Jacobson became the cashier at the State Bank of Moose Lake. Fred Gay shifted to the lumberyard and sawmill business, and I started to work for Martin Brothers of Duluth, purchasing timber and also brokering land in the area. I moved back to the family farm in Ottumwa for a year, but found other business interests calling me. I built the first hotel in Ottumwa Township when it was then still often called Spur 254 and had the Woodring boy running. I started and ran a flour and feed store in Moose Lake only for a few months when I profited from its sale. I continued as a timber and land agent. In 1915, the State Bank of Kettle River was started, with me being the cashier, working for my old friend, S.A. Jacobson of the Moose Lake Bank. The board consisted of Jacobson, F.J. Wilson, Fred Hales, C.J. Dodge, and me. Bonds were sold for $10,000, and $5,000 was taken in the first day. The bank rented a space in the Ryan Building, owned by a local land agent. In the fall of 1917, a brick bank started going up. Nels Berquist of Moose Lake was the general construction contractor. The structure was finished in midwinter. The Moose Lake Star-Gazette wrote in December 1917 that the structure is built of brick with a full basement, a modern heating plant, and the floor in the lobby is tiled, finished in oak, and there were 2 vaults, one above and one below. The fixtures from the old bank site were put into the new building. Business was so brisk at its opening, C.J. Michelson had to be hired as an assistant cashier. The bank prospered as the town boomed. In the afternoon of October 12, 1918, saw the local people doing their daily routine until reports of the calling from the west that the fires were out of control. When firefighters from the west came running into town, panic, fear, and confusion broke out in the streets. A relief train rolled into town on a rescue mission to Ottumba. Phone and telegraph messages said that the situation was desperate. The engineer tried to cross the trestle west of town, but it was burning. He emptied his water out of his engine's water tank, but could not put the fire ablaze out. Fearing he would be trapped by the flames, he went west. If he went west, the engineer backed up to the depot area. He did not wait long as the people piled into the cars. For some reason, some people chose to stay. Blowing the whistle, the engineer started backing up as fast as he could, with passengers passing out and windows breaking from the heat as the train barreled through walls of flame. Somehow they made it. They left the train to burn in the Moose Lake rail yard and ran to the lake. This engineer was a hero. Walter Johnson was my assistant at the bank at the time. I coaxed him to drive refugees to Moose Lake with my car. He made several trips that afternoon until on the last trip, with what is now Highway 73, the road was blocked by fire, and he had to circle north on Township roads coming to Frank Milzar's place, and from there and his family drove west on the south side of burning Kettle River and found safety in the waters of the Kettle River. As the town started to burn about 5:45 p.m., I told Eileen Lekpanikala, telephone central operator, to take her mother and climb into Leonard Lofbeck's truck along with several others and save themselves. The truck headed south of town, loaded with people, and turned over at Dead Man's Curve. Several of them died. Eileen and her mother survived. Why that was so in so many cases, I do not know. As fire threatened, the people of town came to store their values in our bank building, believing it would survive intact. I was lucky and lost no family members that day. After the fire, all that was left standing were the brick walls, and basically the only structure standing in Kettle River. Such a lonely sight. I saw those walls and I knew we needed to rebuild, and we did. Walter Johnson took over as cashier in time. Early in 1919, I started selling farm machinery on Sioux Hill and Moose Lake. The shift to farming demanded modern machinery and the business boomed. I continued active in Moose Lake social groups and helped organize the Odd Fellows Hall in Moose Lake. In 1922, I went to Brookston to run the bank there. The economy shifting to farming. What else could you do when our area was burned clean? Soon the creameries were organized and other co-op ventures started. The Kettle River Bank flourished for a while, but collapsed in the late 1920s, as did Ottumba and Brookston banks, as the major farm depression deepened, and finally the stock market crashed in 1929.
I got time. I am John H. Michelson, and I was a store owner and a postmaster in Kettle River at the time of the big fire. I came with my parents, John and Anna Michelson, and the rest of the siblings from New York Mills. My father had been working on the Great Lakes boats after he came from Finland, and he had been converted to be a Finnish Methodist by a Methodist outreach lay preacher in the eastern Great Lakes ports. My father went on to form, in the early 1890s, the Salem Finnish Methodist Church in the northeast corner of his farm, across the road from the present West Side Covenant Church. There's a monument there now. It became the first Finnish American Methodist church founded in this country. A log building was built, and my father was a lay preacher there, inviting Finnish Methodist ministers from the whole region. He died in 1906, yet services were held there until the 1918 fire, when the building burned and was not rebuilt. My family, all of them, is buried in the old church cemetery at that site. Around 1910, I was living on a farm 1 mile west of Kettle River and then a little bit north towards the railroad tracks. I helped with the early formation of the co-op movement in Kettle River. I was the manager for a shipping association that brought feed and such into Kettle River by rail car. I helped start the co-op store, and after the fire helped start the creamery, and finally replaced Frank Ronkainen in a leadership role in that co-op. Before I became postmaster in Kettle River, I was a mail carrier for a period for rural free delivery. In about 1916, I and my brother C.W. bought out Joe Winquist's interest in what was called the Big Store, built on Finland Town site and would soon be known as Kettle River. I became the postmaster, and we purchased timber products out of the store while handling a full line of general merchandise. My brother C.W. sold his interest to me in 1917, and he moved to run a store in Crosby. From there, he moved to Willow River to run another store. During those years, my mother, Anna, came to live with my family in town. We were active in a group that sponsored Finnish Methodist services held in the Kettle River School. The day of the fire, my wife had gone to Duluth with our youngest child to visit and was safe that day. I waited in Kettle River too long. The fire entered the woodyard, the town on fire. I took my 68-year-old mother and the 2 boys, Ralph and Armand, and headed to Moose Lake. The smoke and the darkness covered the first curve south of Kettle River, and my Chevrolet piled up with 10 other vehicles. I left my car and went running for help as fast as I could go to a field. My clothes caught on fire. My coat burned completely off. Some of the refugees rolled me in the field to put out the flames. I carried those scars the rest of my life. I spent the first day in agony in a root cellar on John Salmey's burnt farm until I was brought to the Superior Hospital. Reports were that my mother was burned to death, still sitting in the car. The boys, Armand and Ralph, were dead, not too far away. I heard one witness say one of the boys tried to take shelter in a wooden culvert to no avail. My wife found me at the hospital later and asked, "Where are my boys?" "Gone," I answered. "Gone where?" she asked. "Her and mother too," I whispered hoarsely through a bandaged mouth. My wife went down to Kettle River in December, after weeks of watching over me in the hospital. An article in the Barnum Herald described her visit to the site of our destroyed store. It read, "Upon reaching Kettle River and opening the safe that was in the store, she discovered a letter written to her by her 15-year-old son, Ralph. A few minutes before Kettle River started to burn, in which he stated that he was locking the books in the safe, but that he did not think the town would burn as there were so many firefighters out. Ralph never had an opportunity of mailing that letter to her, as he was burned to death in the fire." I rebuilt and continued brokering land in the area. I had been a member of the Knights of the Kaliva, and the hall burned in the fire. My wife and I became members of the local Lutheran church and donated the land that Holy Trinity Lutheran Church was built on in this town.
Okay, this is for those that survived and stayed and rebuilt, rising from the ashes. The jack pine tree just north of town, knotted like an old man's fingers. No reason to cut it down, rest a log, but this tree lingers. The landscape turned to flaming hell, but this tree has a devil meat. Holds its seeds in resin shells, waiting for a fire's heat. We locked the papers in the safe along with letters of goodbye. Our only thought was to escape. Tomorrow there'd be time to cry. Flaming curtains, broken glass, tires melting on the road. Overcome by smoke at last, without a loving hand to hold. You think the future's dark and bleak, the evening news is frightening. Your safety net is looking weak, the box you're in is tightening. One bad check from being broke, you hope nobody cashes. Remember us in clearing smoke, rising from the ashes. Rising from the ashes. Rising from the ashes. Rising from the ashes. Hard to even find the town, the fire consumed it to its roots. The photographs or wedding gowns, no valuables to save or loot. The only sight above the ash, the vault where the bank used to be. Deeds and notes worth more than cash, like the seeds of that old black jackpine tree. July's too hot and March too long, it is or isn't raining. There's always something going wrong and someone else complaining. Think that you've been beaten down by life's bad luck and crashes. Remember Kettle River town, so rising from the ashes. Rising from the ashes. Rising from the ashes. Rising from the ashes. I head north from the tower tap to the first right after Highway 6. Following a hand-drawn map to get my Kettle River fix. The ground is thick with waist-high ferns and a canopy of poplar trees. Forest grows, the forest burns, and slips away the history. And outside the bar by neon lights, the grandchildren remember stories told on autumn nights while stirring campfire embers. Just past the Kettle River sign where the two ferns give way to grasses, century-old knotted pine, still rising from the ashes. Still rising from the ashes. Rising from the ashes. Still rising from the ashes.
As the song says, this, even with many of these somber stories, in the end of each one of them, of those that survived, this is a time of rebirth, a time of renewal. The old ones came here with hope from the old country, built themselves a farm, some way of living, and yet life changed and they had to reinvent themselves, start sawmills, stores, any kind of adventure that they could make money at, depressions, whatever. They were always reinventing themselves in order to live here in this area. And even today, we as a people that live here, have roots here, we continue to reinvent ourselves and make our journeys how we need to do that. And so it's a program of actually hope. And next year, we're going to do a program here again of how everything came up from the ashes and how the area rebuilt itself through its many struggles, through its many accomplishments. Just like to let you know, there's time now after this. Those of you, the lights will come on, you'll be able to mill around at all the exhibits and that. The Moose Lake Area Historical Society is here. They have a large number of books related to the fire, and they'll sell a bunch of them if you want to purchase some. Some of us are going to go to the Sarvela, Dyson, and Estrie, Martila gathering over at the Senior Center. But thank you very much for coming. Did I forget anything?
Yes.
Oh, and then our little buddy here, Bob Nordquist, who's just a wonderful performer. He also has CDs of his production, and we're very grateful for him to come, and very honored. Thank you very much for coming, and a Finn would say, Nakamin, till we see you next time.
Paul would say,